After 25 years, Brian returned to that small town that had shaped his past and determined the course of his life. Upon entering the local restaurant, his eyes immediately found someone he hoped to see again: Jamie, the woman whose heart he had broken when he left her. However, the person next to her made it clear that many things had changed in Jamie's life, revealing a reality that Brian never imagined facing. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Brian arrived in the small town one autumn afternoon when the golden leaves danced in the wind along the quiet streets. He was a tall and handsome man with piercing green eyes and a mysterious smile on his lips. No one knew him, and his sudden arrival sparked the curiosity of the local residents. The first thing Brian did was to purchase a large house in the most prestigious part of town. It was a house with well-tended gardens and a breathtaking view of the distant mountains. People commented, intrigued about how he could have so much money. Brian simply said he had inherited a fortune from a distant uncle, but something in his gaze suggested there was more to the story than he was letting on. It was on a sunny morning that Brian met Jamie. She was a teacher at the small local school, a woman with wavy brown hair and honey-coloured eyes that shone with kindness. Jamie was in the Central Park, reading a book to a group of enthusiastic children. Brian stopped to watch, charmed by the way she interacted with the little ones. When the reading session ended, Brian approached to introduce himself. Jamie smiled, a warm smile that lit up her face. "Welcome to our town," she said, extending her hand. "I hope you like it here as much as we do." In the days that followed, Brian and Jamie met several times by chance. He saw her at the local bakery buying fresh bread in the morning. She spotted him walking through the park in the late afternoon. Gradually, they began to talk more, discovering common interests. Jamie spoke passionately about her work as a teacher. "Each child is a world of possibilities," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Seeing them learn and grow is the greatest reward I can imagine." Brian listened, fascinated not only by the words but by the person behind them. Jamie was genuine, dedicated, full of life. He found himself thinking about her with increasing frequency, longing for their casual encounters. The video will be back shortly. In the meantime, we kindly ask you to consider giving a like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment. The video is back. One day, while they were walking together through the city centre, Jamie mentioned the financial difficulties the school was facing. "The children deserve a better environment to learn," she sighed, looking at the school's old building. "But the city's budget is so tight." Brian felt his heart tighten. He wanted to do something, anything, to help Jamie and the children she loved so much. Without a second thought, he offered to make a donation to the school. "New desks, chairs, maybe even a renovation," he suggested, trying to appear casual. Jamie's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. "Brian, that would be amazing. But that's a lot of money. Are you sure?" He smiled, feeling genuinely happy to be able to help. "Absolutely. It's the least I can do for the community that welcomed me so well." The news of Brian's generous donation quickly spread throughout the small town. People saw him in a new light, as a benefactor, a man with a good heart. Everyone, except Ross. Ross was a man in his 30s, the pharmacist at the town's old pharmacy. He and Jamie had been friends for years, confidants to each other. But Ross kept a secret. He had been in love with Jamie since they met. When Brian arrived in town and started getting close to Jamie, Ross felt a twinge of jealousy and distrust. There was something about the newcomer that didn't seem right, a shadow behind the charming smile. One afternoon, while Jamie and Brian were chatting animatedly in the town's central square, Ross was watching them from a distance. His eyes narrowed when he saw Jamie laughing at something Brian said, lightly touching his arm. "Hey, Ross!" Brian called out to him, waving. "Come join us!" Ross hesitated for a moment before approaching. "Hello, Brian," he said, his tone polite but cold. "Jamie." Jamie, sensing the tension in the air, tried to lighten the mood. "Ross, Brian was telling me about his travels. Isn't it fascinating? Sure, Ross replied, his smile not very convincing. It must be interesting to have so much time and money to travel the world. Brian picked up on the hint, but maintained his smile. I was lucky, it's true. But believe me, it wasn't always easy. Days passed and the relationship between Brian and Jamie blossomed. They spent more and more time together, sharing laughter, dreams, and moments of comfortable silence. Brian felt his heart fill with a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time: love. Jamie, for her part, was enchanted. Brian was attentive, intelligent, and kind. She found herself thinking about him when she was alone, recalling their conversations, longing for the next meeting. On a starry night, they walked hand in hand through the city's central square. The soft streetlights illuminated the path, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Jamie, Brian said, stopping and turning to her. I think I'm in love with you. Jamie's heart raced. She looked into his eyes, seeing the same emotion she felt. Brian, she whispered, I am too, for you. They kissed, a sweet kiss full of promises. When they parted, Jamie smiled, her eyes shining. You know, she said, I've always believed that true love can change people, make them better versions of themselves. Brian felt a tightness in his chest. If only she knew. You're right, he replied, forcing a smile. Love has that power. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Brian and Jamie became inseparable. They made plans for the future and daydreamed about a life together. Jamie talked about having children and starting a family. Brian listened, his heart torn between the joy of these dreams and the weight of a secret he carried. One day, while walking through the park, Brian and Jamie noticed a crowd near the central fountain. As they approached, they saw a young man being detained by a police officer. The boy, visibly nervous, was holding a small box in his hands. What's happening? Brian asked one of the onlookers. It's Tomas, the person replied. He was caught stealing an expensive watch from Mr. Miller's jewellery shop. Jamie recognised the young man immediately. Tomas was one of my students, she said, with concern in her voice. He always was so promising. Brian watched as Tomas was taken away by the police officer. It's sad to see someone so young making choices like that, he commented. Jamie sighed, her eyes fixed on the student being taken away. He has so much potential. I don't understand why he would do something like this. As they continued to walk, Brian noticed that Jamie was thoughtful. Are you okay? He asked. I was thinking about Tomas, she replied. I believe our choices always have consequences. Even when we are forgiven, we still have to deal with the outcome of our actions. Brian felt like he had been punched in the stomach. What do you mean? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Jamie shrugged, unaware of the impact of her words. It's something I always tell my students. We must be responsible for our actions, you know. Tomas made a wrong decision, and now he will have to face the consequences. But I also believe in the power of redemption, of sincere regret. I hope he can learn from this and find a better path. That night, alone in his large house, Brian couldn't sleep. Jamie's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the memories of his past. He knew he couldn't continue living this lie. Jamie deserved the truth, deserved someone better than him. With a heavy heart, Brian made a decision. He wrote a letter to Jamie, a letter full of cruel lies. In it, he said that everything had been just a game, that he had grown tired of life in the small town and was leaving in search of new adventures. Each word tore him apart, but he knew it was the only way to make Jamie give up on him without revealing the painful truth. The next morning, before leaving, Brian was surprised by Ross. The pharmacist was waiting for him at the town's exit, arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. So you're leaving, Ross said. It wasn't a question. Brian sighed, too tired to pretend. Yes, I am. Why? Ross demanded. What are you hiding, Brian? At that moment, looking into Ross's suspicious eyes, Brian felt the weight of his secrets becoming unbearable. He needed to tell someone, even if it was the man who hated him. I am not who everyone thinks I am, Brian began, his voice low and weary. All this money, it didn't come from an inheritance. I was part of a bank robbery, Ross. A big heist. Ross remained silent, too shocked to react. Brian continued, but that's not the worst. During the escape, I ran over a police officer. He died. His voice faltered on the last word, the guilt evident in every syllable. My God, Brian, Ross murmured, the anger giving way to disbelief. I came here hoping to start over, to escape my past, Brian said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. But then I met Jamie, and she made me want to be a better person. She made me realize that I can't run from the consequences of my actions forever. Ross observed the man in front of him, seeing for the first time the genuine pain and remorse in his eyes. What are you going to do now? He asked. I will turn myself in, Brian replied, his voice firm despite the fear he felt. I will face the consequences of my actions. It's what Jamie would do. It's what she taught me, even without knowing. Ross remained silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he spoke. And Jamie? What should I tell her? Brian closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. Please don't tell her the truth. Let her think that I'm just a scoundrel who played with her feelings. It's better that way. She deserves to be happy, Ross. And you love her, don't you? Ross nodded slowly, surprised that Brian knew about his feelings. Then make her happy, Brian said. Take care of her. Love her as she deserves to be loved. Promise me that. I promise, Ross replied, his voice low but firm. With one last look at the city that had been his home for such a short time, Brian left, carrying with him the weight of his mistakes and the memory of the love he found and lost. 25 years passed like a breath. The seasons came and went, bringing changes to the small town and the lives of its inhabitants. The school where Jamie taught grew, and the children she taught became adults with children of their own. Ross had bought the pharmacy where he had worked for years. And Brian? Brian paid for his crimes. Years behind bars, reflecting on his choices, regretting, but also growing. He never forgot Jamie. The love he felt for her was the beacon that guided him through the darkest moments. Now, finally free, Brian returned to the city that once embraced him. He had no expectations, didn't dare hope for anything. He just wanted to see, even if from afar, the woman who changed his life and whom he still loved deep down. The doorbell jingled softly as Brian entered the small restaurant. The aroma of fresh pasta and tomato sauce enveloped him, bringing back memories of a life that seemed to have happened in another century. His eyes scanned the room, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. And then he saw her. Jamie was sitting at a table near the window, the late afternoon sunlight playing in her now salt and pepper hair. She was smiling, her eyes still as bright as Brian remembered, focused on something or someone. Beside her was Ross, also older, but with the same attentive and protective look that Brian remembered. And sitting with them, two young people, a young man and a young woman, probably in their 20s. Their children, Brian realized, feeling a twinge of... what? Regret? Acceptance? He watched the scene for a moment, absorbing every detail. The way Jamie tilted her head when she laughed, the look of adoration in Ross's eyes, the lively conversation of the young people. It was a picture of family happiness, of a life well lived. Brian felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Sadness for what could have been, gratitude for what was, and a strange sense of peace. He had made the right choice, however painful it had been. Jamie had the life she deserved, full of love, family, and purpose. For a brief moment, Jamie's eyes drifted from the conversation and met Brian's. There was a flash of recognition, a shadow of a memory passing across her face. But before any words could be spoken, before the past could invade the present, Brian turned and left the restaurant. Outside, he took a deep breath of the fresh afternoon air. The weight he had carried for so many years seemed lighter now. Jamie was happy, and that was all that mattered. The love he had felt for her, the love he still felt, had been the force that transformed him, that made him want to be a better person. Brian began to walk, his steps slow and thoughtful. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace with his past. The sacrifice he had made for love had been worth it. And although his heart still held a special place for Jamie, he was ready to turn the page and write a new chapter in his life. As the sun set on the horizon, Brian smiled. True love, he had learned, is not just about being with someone, but wanting the best for that person, even if it means giving up one's own happiness. And in that moment, seeing Jamie's happiness, Brian knew that his love for her had been true and transformative. With this comforting thought, he moved forward, leaving behind the small town and the memories of a love that, although unfulfilled, had changed his life forever. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.